This episode of the Ankler Podcast is sponsored by Universal Pictures presenting Wicked. Wicked is nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Actress, Cynthia Erivo, Best Supporting Actress, Ariana Grande, and Best Picture of the Year. The American Film Institute calls Wicked a modern classic and says the screen has rarely seen or heard towering performances like those delivered by Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. Wicked, now playing in theaters and available to watch at home.
The industry's climbing its way out of a pit. I mean, this is about as optimistic as one can sound right now.
Are they climbing their way out of a pit, though?
They're trying, it sounds like, yeah.
Flailing at the bottom of a pit.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. This is Sean McNulty of the Wake Up Newsletter here at the Ankler here on the Jersey Shore on Thursday, February 6th. I'm joined in Los Angeles by Richard Rushfield and in Miami by Elaine Lowe, who is, for some reason, not doing this podcast from the Ankler's famous beach bungalow in South Beach. Elaine, what happened? Did you forget your Ankler work badge in L.A.? I mean, what's going on?
What, you can't tell from this windowless ballroom that I'm in?
Is this not a bungalow? You're actually at the bungalow
Miami. Miami looks beautiful from my hotel room window. I'm sure it's a lovely city.
I've heard it's great.
Yeah. But once again, I will be jetting in to the hotel and leaving in approximately 2 hours after this podcast ends.
Elaine, you do know how to travel, whether it's Banff, Miami, you just always see the sights. Banff, you got out in Banff this year. I remember that, or the last time you went to Banff. So
I did. I set foot outside of the hotel for a couple of minutes there.
I saw a photo, so that was legit that time. But Elaine is, of course, down at the NatB TV convention all week there in Miami, and we'll share what she's been hearing on the ground there in just a little bit. I'm sure Richard has a ton of buffet questions for you, Elaine, so I hope you took notes. Conspicuous notes there for all.
I'm going to disappoint Richard.
Just a spoiler. I'm going to disappoint there. But outside of new Oscar campaign controversies, which Katie Rich has been all over this week, I recommend you go check out the Prestige Junkie podcast there for all the intel and insights on the latest there. But Richard, everyone's been dropping me DMs and emails all week, looking for the scoop about what you'll be making for the Super Bowl on Sunday, and whether you're taking the over or under on the total score. So give us something for the people, Richard.
So Philadelphia has the cheesesteaks. Philadelphia is really perhaps the greatest junk food city in
they've won the junk food
America
Super
or the
Bowl.
world. So they've got my support there.
No Kansas City barbecue though, Richard?
I lived there when I was in my 20s. I lived there for about 6 months once, and beautiful city, and I probably gained 30 pounds in 6 months. And
sign of a good stay. Yeah.
It really has one of the great junk food traditions in America. So I will be honoring that instead without having to watch the football too.
All right, that's Richard's version of Go Birds, I think, is what that translates to.
I have tried Kansas City barbecue during my Midwest days.
All right. We're thinking about the barbecue now. That's
Kansas
it.
City barbecue
hold on,
is of course also one of the great traditions of American cuisine. So it's one of the three major barbecue traditions.
That's in America.
Carolina, Texas, and Kansas City. So
okay.
Yeah, so it's not to be shrugged off.
Not to be sure. I think your heart's in Philly. That's what it sounded like there, Richard. But we'll see how the game shakes out on Sunday. Otherwise, Elaine, I think, the TV biz, it's certainly in your world, but otherwise I think was the predominant thing. And certainly in my sightline this week, both Fox and Disney opened up their Q4 books. And Comcast gave us a pretty good snapshot about the business trends that the new SpinCo will be facing. But maybe we dive into Disney first. Elaine, their Q4 earnings call was on Wednesday, which launched with a whopping 2 minutes Bob Iger talk before he's just like, so, any questions? It was very, very, it was oddly, I mean, they're not always long things at the top, but it was just literally like, yeah, movies did well and ESPN ratings are up and theme parks are doing okay. Any questions from you guys about what's going on?
Wait, they opened it right up to questions? They didn't go to the CFO? They didn't do all their
usual?
No,
it was Bob did 2 minutes and that was like.
Just a tight two from Bob, all
tight
right.
two. I mean, listen, yeah. No more 2-hour Mufasa movie. It's definitely a 2-hour, 2-minute opening there, but not unprecedented. But otherwise, Disney Plus subs were down 700,000 globally. They were up 800,000 in the U.S., but again, that's minus 700,000 in the same quarter. Netflix added 19 million, just as a comp there. Hulu was up 1.7 million. Man, that thing's still adding subs, Elaine. I will say, it doesn't get a lot of press, that business, but it does keep chugging along there. I don't know.
Hulu is their workhorse, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, I know.
Everybody talks about Disney Plus, but I mean, I think we really aren't looking at Hulu or even Hulu Plus Live enough, are we?
Yeah, well, that's going to be spun off into into Fubo with whatever in about 12 to 18 months on that. But but in terms of a sub count, I mean, I think it's. Disney Plus is in the U.S. was close to 57 million. Hulu's at about 54. Like they're pretty much neck and neck in terms of distribution. Of course, Hulu was added as a tile inside Disney Plus, and that seems to be as you said, Disney Plus is the flagship there. But just some interesting things to note: the streaming profit was at 293 million in profitability for streaming. That's up from 253 million in Q3.
Yay,
so
good
those
for them.
numbers,
they swung to a profit.
Yeah, amazing what a price cycle do, Elaine. This, of course, was Q4 when they raised the price of certainly the Disney Plus ad tier by 25%, I think, $2 a month.
Which is what accounts for the expected sub decline, which was, as I understand it, less than expected, though, right? Weren't they expecting to lose a couple of million subs?
Went up in America. I mean, they raised the prices, American price hike, and the subs went up. The decrease was in Europe and Africa, in the EMEA region, in the Middle East. So the American subs went up in the same quarter as a price hike, and the Hulu price went up too, and the subs were added 1.7 million, maybe, we don't know how many of those are in the Disney bundle, of course, versus individual. But so not saying, Bob, I tell you, Richard, Bob's right, Iger's right. Like, price hikes, he's done it, 2-3 times now in the past, since he's returned, and there's been no material change here. People just don't look at their bills, Richard. I mean, I know you famously don't yourself, so that's Exhibit A, but so far so good for Bob Iger on the price hikes, sir, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, somewhere there's a ceiling, and
we still haven't found it yet. Yeah,
someone will be the one that finds that when
it's a fun hot potato, certainly.
Yeah, when they raise their price too high and get a massive cancellation. So we'll see who gets to be that one. But I mean, this is all a new sector, and I just feel like we talked about this with Comcast last week, and it's just everyone is strangely very quiet. Like that Iger opening there, it's just like
right.
Everyone's just like
quiet. Yeah.
What's going on here? I don't know.
Things are fine.
Showbiz fine. Yeah. What do you guys want to talk about?
It's kind of, yeah.
None of this is normal. And, we predicted last year that the start of the Trump administration would be the starting bell of a wave of acquisition. And here we are 3 weeks into that.
This is what we're seeing.
People are behaving very oddly, like they're not talking about what's really going on. So
yeah, take from that as you like. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, read into what's not being said. He will say, we'll dive into linear TV here. And Iger was asked, about the linear TV business there.
And he had such positive, encouraging words. They're not a burden at all.
Well, the quote is, we are actually at a point where the linear networks in our company are not a burden at all. They're actually an asset. So that was that was his one line. And then he followed up by, I won't rule out the possibility some of the smaller networks in some form or another being configured differently in terms of how we bring them to market, maybe even ownership, i.e. who, selling these things off. So kind of a dual, and I think when he's being the linear assets being an asset, I think he's talking about ABC, Elaine. Certainly ESPN is certainly predominantly a linear TV network, and FX is certainly a strong business. So I don't think he's talking about Freeform or the Nat Geos or Disney XDs of the world there, Elaine. So, but yeah, interesting.
But don't you like to hear it if you're a net? How am I doing, Dad? Oh, you're not a burden at all.
I don't know who brought that up. Who said that? No one's saying, of course not. We love you all.
Okay, but I've been tuned out a little bit, obviously, being at this conference for the last couple of days. What's up with this new ESPN streaming app? Is it called Flagship or is it a flagship?
No, Flagship is a working title, Elaine. This is an internal reference. That's the term for their D2C product that, breaking out of the bundle, which is going to launch in the fall. No, it will not be called Flagship. Well, maybe not. Everybody's calling it Flagship because that's the way they're alluding to it internally. But no, it does not have a name. That's going to be the big thing coming in the second half of the year. Again, big change coming there to that business. Again, things are still kind of like they're going to have a big second half of the year. I think the first half, to Richard's point, it's like a little bit quiet. And whether that's because something's afoot or just natural cadence of the business, you can certainly place your bets. But overall, though, in terms of linear TV, though, look at the numbers. And so outside of ESPN, which is in the sports line, and that money is linear TV. There's not much else really going on there. I mean, ESPN Plus to a small degree, but Disney's Q4 linear TV revenues, entertainment networks only, this includes ABC, was $2.6 billion. At NBCU, that's $4.3 billion. At WBD, the past Q4 was $5 billion, and Paramount was $5.2 billion. So they have half the amount of exposure to that business as the other studios. So again, like lumping them all together is not really there's a reason Bob's maybe being a little, like, yeah, they're not a burden. Like, yeah, because they're not a big part. Disney made, I think $25 billion, mid $20 billion in the quarter. This is $2.6 billion. It's, less than, it's about 10% of their total number in Q4. Yeah, it's a business. It's not going to, if it goes away, it's not going to totally, kill the Disney revenue model. So
that is a little bit of a tonal shift, though, isn't it? Back when Bob was exploring a potential spinoff, maybe of ABC and some of those nets. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to find the right language. I think Elaine, where yes, the not a burden was not the term he used, a year and a half ago there on CNBC. So we're looking at exploring stuff. So it is what it is. But you're talking, again, freeform. It's not, it's not, they're not going to spin off FX. It's like, no, like it's a big part of, Hulu. And so it's not exactly the same situation, but a couple other final numbers at Disney. Their total profit was $2.6 billion. That includes the theme parks. Netflix was 1.9. So like Disney makes more money than Netflix, even though the stock price was down 2%, where Netflix's goes through the roof. I get the trends are different, et cetera, but Disney as a company throws off a ton of cash. And even the entertainment profits, a lot of that's theme parks. The entertainment profits at Disney were $1.7 billion and Netflix was 1.9. So not that far apart in terms of the scope of money these companies are making. But anyway, just some fun facts there. Over at Fox, they're going to join streaming, Elaine. So, not in a Peacock way, but Fox Sports and Fox News are going to be coming to streaming later by end of year.
And I mean, that you want to talk about a shift. I mean, they've opted not to be in the DTC game for a while. What prompted that? I
think at this point, you kind of got, they needed a sports plan. When Venue collapsed, that was their sports plan, D2C. And at this point, I think for the leagues that they carry, they're probably getting pressure. You need to have these games on streaming at some point. And with Venue collapse, this was the next pivot they're going to make. They stress it's not the future. It's not, they're still a linear TV company. I mean, in the end, that is what that DNA of that company is. And they're still towing the line. But, they have the most popular, I mean, it's like the biggest suite on the Titanic, but like they have the most popular channel on cable by far. Like, that is the reason cable, it's on the back of Fox News at this point. Ratings-wise, it's not even close to any other network in total day or primetime most days. So but they're still riding it, and they will ride it as far as they can take it. But, they certainly have that Smartmatic lawsuit still out there looming and other things of the company in terms of the finances. So Fox is kind of towing the line, and we'll see what the streaming product is. And even Lachlan was kind of downplaying it. It's not going to be a big part of our company, yada, yada, but we'll see how that goes. And they're also, Richard, have a lot of cash and have been rumored to be, but Lachlan said, we're out there looking for stuff, Richard. So again, no news on that front, but again, no news is often a quiet time, right?
I think the next 3 months are going to, the world will look very different 3 months
by summertime
than it does right now. Everything is way too quiet, given the unstable and quiet does not add up to like, oh, everything's great.
Yeah. And I will say, Paramount has not even set their earnings call yet. We're here on February 6th. They haven't even set a date for their call yet. So that's a curious note. Obviously, could be nothing at all, could be whatever, but no earnings call for them as of yet. And as a final note here, Comcast released their 10K form, the annual form, the SEC form every year. They have to release at the end of the fiscal year. And looking at the SpinCo networks, they include the distribution for all their cable TV networks. And all of their cable TV networks lost between 9 and 10 million subscribers in the past 2 years. So, you're talking about loss of, I think it was 13% in a 2-year period of distribution. I did some basic back of the napkin math, Elaine, on how much money that is. And it's, it's roughly a loss of $500 million. It may probably be more than that in distribution fees alone in 2 years. And this is what SpinCo is going to be. I mean, outside of Bravo, which is staying in-house, but these are going to be public numbers that SpinCo is going to go before Wall Street every quarter, and have to be like, all right, there's no other business there. That's, as of now, SpinCo is just these businesses. There's nothing else like, and we have a theme park business or we have a streaming business.
Right, there's nothing to offset. It's all linear.
It's all loss. So it's like, they need to find an X factor of a growth business to add in that mix, or they're going to be going for Wall Street every 3 or 4 months. And, Richard, it's like, hey guys, same narrative.
So once they spit off, they'll be looking to get out of the cable business too. So
I think, I mean, it's interesting. It'll be a public company. It is what it is. And again, Comcast shareholders will own them. When it goes public, they're going to be the ones, the shareholders in it. So it's not like it's like, we're financially out of the business, but it's just looking at those numbers, Elaine. I mean, it's just like, all right, this is what this, and picture another, the SpinCo won't happen for essentially about this time next year. it's not going to be much better at that point. It's just interesting to kind of think about that at this point, looking at
You
those
mean the
numbers.
cable numbers aren't going to improve as time continues?
I don't know that. I shouldn't say this. Maybe there will be a huge turnaround in cable TV this year, but chances are those numbers get worse. But
I mean, when you look at what was that stat that I read? I think it was Bravo. I mean, how much of their cable viewing essentially comes from Bravo that's being driven to Peacock? Like it was well over 90%, I think.
Well, 90. Yeah. So these networks, SpinCo networks, were less than 2% of total viewing on Peacock. So yeah, that was the stat of it. And Bravo being one of the other ones outside of Bravo were less than 2%, Elaine. So a non-factor of no one's watching, USA Network programming on Peacock.
That's
so
wild.
We shall see, but everybody's trying to find their way. Said NBC's gone SpinCo. Disney, again, doesn't have a lot of exposure to this stuff. And WBD and Paramount, it's like, what are you guys going to do? They're certainly up next, I said, in earnings season. But, those are the biggest ones that have the biggest questions here as we enter 2025. But I'll be, of course, covering Warner Brothers is on February 27th. I'll break down those numbers in the wake up, of course.
Is that the next big one? Do you actually have like a couple of weeks between major earnings so you can get your head out of the earnings cave?
Yeah, I could use a little reset. Some meditation would be helpful for my brain at this point, I think. Yeah, exactly. I have Lionsgate's up later today, but they're not as complicated as a company. So yes, I get a little bit of a reprieve there. So thank you. I'll be taking that, enjoying that very much so, Elaine. So thank you for putting that back in my brain as a comforting thought. But coming up next, Elaine's going to tell us the best place to have a chef's menu in South Beach, and which beaches are best for tanning. Elaine, that's quite a report you have for us.
Oh, God.
Maybe a few things you heard from attendees on the convention floor there at NATPE there in Miami this week. So
yeah,
Elaine,
probably a little more of the latter than the former.
All right, not to over tease it. Okay, just so you know what's coming up, everybody. We'll be back in a moment. This episode of the Ankler Podcast is sponsored by Universal Pictures presenting Wicked. Wicked is nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Actress, Cynthia Erivo, Best Supporting Actress, Ariana Grande, and Best Picture of the Year. The American Film Institute calls Wicked a modern classic and says the screen has rarely seen or heard towering performances like those delivered by Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. Wicked, now playing in theaters and available to watch at home. All right, Elaine, you look very Miami chic there. Thanks for taking off your sunglasses to do the podcast. We really appreciate it.
For our listeners at home, I'm wearing a hoodie and I'm in a windowless ballroom in a hotel.
Elaine, the life I'm painting is much more entertaining. You should lean into this. I'm telling you. I mean, you got to learn how to travel
leading
like
into
Rushfield.
a little fictional podcasting here.
We want to see a glamorous life of writers. We want to have to make sure they lead a glamorous life, not the usual life. Right, Richard?
Absolutely. We should be on the front page of the fashion magazines all the time.
Exactly. We're restoring the old glory that used to exist in the writing business. But so you're done at NATPE. So to set up for folks, what exactly is NATPE? Those who don't know, Elaine.
Yeah, so it's an annual conference for producers, and there's a whole host of TV people here, both locally, both domestic from the U.S., and a lot of international figures. This year it was combined with Real Screen, so there were a few days of Real Screen, which is largely a nonfiction and unscripted, and then NATPE. So we've been covering all of the bases here between Minori Ravindran, my fellow series business author, and I. We have moderated 5 panels between the two of us over the last 4 days. So
Wow.
We are very well informed now on the TV biz, both domestically and internationally. And people, I gotta say, are feeling, I think, optimistic. I don't necessarily know to what degree that's optimism by necessity versus optimism by metrics. But everybody has to kind of go into this year feeling better than they did about last year, because largely when you ask people, how is your 2024? I mean, both here and abroad, it's, listen, slower than expected. The production situation kind of is what it is. I mean, we've seen production numbers decline stateside, but, in the UK, there's also a scripted funding crisis over there. Like there are just all sorts of things sort of going on in different parts of the world. And it was really insightful to learn a little bit more about that from our speakers. I was talking to, the CEO of BBC Studios and Fremantle Media on a panel this morning. Like I said, I think everybody is looking for growth where they can, realistically, but optimistically.
Okay. Any topics that would recur in your conversations or subjects that maybe come up a little more than others, or anything that are, front of mind for people in terms maybe they want to know from you, or anything along those lines that were maybe more predominant than others during the week?
I think every conversation starts out by talking about kind of how depressed the numbers have been recently, and like how we don't sugarcoat that, but you're looking forward. I had moderated a panel yesterday at the Real Screen and Nappy crossover day about brands funding entertainment and sort of not in the traditional way that we think about it, not like ads or product placement or even kind of like advertorial branded content, but really brands integrating with the development process and being introduced into the development process with creatives more upstream, and just the broader acceptance that we've seen in Hollywood and beyond of that. And, they were saying, sometimes we get a little bit of resistance from creatives who like really don't want a brand in their in their creative soup. But there's actually, we had panelists from CAA and elsewhere there. And yeah, there's just really increasing embrace, I think, of being open to including brands in a creative way where it's not just like slapping a logo on or shoehorning in. And I thought that was interesting because it's like, I don't know, at some point brands were kind of like a dirty word, and like you wouldn't want that.
It kind of shifts, like, like I don't know, there's been eras where, yes, it was dirty, but the original origins of television started out very much integrated, and then it was like, no, we're independent. Then like in the, I don't know, product placement in shows was a hot topic for a long time there in the 2000s,
right.
I feel like, and then that kind of went away. And now it's like, again, like these kind of sways of this topic, Elaine. I think it's, when the money gets tight, it sounds like, Richard, a lot of people looking for money at this point of just like, we need to make these budgets work, and we got to get creative here. So we're a little more amenable to this stuff, Richard, now than we might have been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, none of this sounds good. Like the fact that people are saying, well, it's okay, it could be better, we're fighting hope where we can, and that Bob Iger saying, well, okay, we're fine with these networks being part of our family. Like, none of this is anything like a vision for the future. Or what it sounds like when things are going well. Like,
right.
Well, when the industry's climbing its way out of a pit, I mean, this is about as optimistic as one can sound right now.
Are they climbing their way out of a pit, though?
They're trying, it sounds like, yeah.
Flailing at the bottom of a pit.
That's probably the eye of the beholder to some degree there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is as you've written about in terms of, this sector. Again, the boom is over. This is like, all right, this is like that moment, where they're not the bottom, and Richard said clawing out. I'm like, all right, this is what people are trying to do. And this is, again, evidence, Elaine, you're trying to, again, find that money, get creative. It's like there is some motivation. It's not a positive story, maybe, Richard, of like, or things are going great, or there's a real big booming future here. But there's entrepreneurialism, it sounds like, Elaine. And it sounds like a little bit like, all right, we're going to figure this out, and it's not going to be something we used to do, or maybe something new or different. But, there's still a spirit there, maybe. Maybe I'm being more optimistic here, Richard. You're kind of scowling at me, but all right,
I'm
fine.
just saying you've got some really – so when you've got some really big systemic problems, like you've got a change in the way people receive information, like a migration to totally free media, the questions about whether film going will continue to exist, how many networks are going to be. You've got these really, really big challenges, and in the face of that, like, okay, well, we've got a little bit going here and a little bit going there, and we're helpful about this in Q3. Like, what I want to hear is someone saying, okay, we looked at it, this is the new landscape, this is the thing, we see huge opportunity here, we're retooling our business towards this, this is where we grow, and here's a future we're really excited about. Until I hear that, I hear people managing failure with no particular vision for it.
Well, I'll play the Netflix earnings call, Richard. Maybe that will be you might hear a bit of it there.
Well, could you blame people for, even if they truly are feeling optimistic, for hedging a little bit, given the last couple of years?
Do you think they truly are feeling optimistic? Do you think that's what the feeling is, that they're like, things are going to be great. 2 years from now, we're going to be boom times again?
I don't think anybody's thinking we're going to be boom times, but I do think people feel like we've hit the bottom is kind of what it feels like. And that the trudge back up isn't necessarily going to be fast. It's not going to be a rocket ship back out. We're not going to be back to, a peak TV era, which I think everybody by consensus has agreed was a bubble and an anomaly. But we're going to climb back up to whatever that renewed cadence is, where there is hopefully something of a sustainable
2018. Here we come. Like
Yeah.
the world has changed since then. Like we can't trudge our way back to a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, like I said, I don't think anybody expects it to be back to like peak TV levels of production, like 21, 22, but they're hoping for something that's approximating normalcy.
Making a living, I mean, as Richard, it's like, how do I make a career out of this and make it viable and make some money? Like, that's all we're talking about here. We're not talking about how do I get back to 2019? Yeah, no one thinks that. It shouldn't go back to that. It was dumb. We all said this. It was stupid.
I'm not talking about a fiscal vision for like, how do we get the balance sheets right? I want someone to tell me, like, what does a media company look like in 2030? What is the driver of that? What is going to be the thing that's really going to be our growth engine? Where are people excited about? That's what I don't hear.
Yeah. Well, it's streaming and advertising is really so there's your 1-2 answer on that.
Yeah, I was going to say ads. Ads was the thing that came to mind when you said, what are people going to get excited about?
And that was linear TV. And this is not
Again, that's a fiscal answer. That's not a creative answer.
But you're asking, Richard, you're separating two things that are related. I don't know. You can't separate these things. Fiscal drives the whole thing. It's money, Richard. Money. Follow the money.
Okay. No one looks back at any period in studio history and say, oh, that was a great time when the advertising product was really figured out.
It's called the 90s. We just don't want the whole thing, Richard. What are you talking about?
And that is
the whole era of Friends and Seinfeld and all of that was very like ad back.
And that is not anyone's story of why the 90s were a vital era, except for you guys.
Drove it?
But the funding
the DVD
was
money,
crucial.
Richard. Follow the money. What drove all those great movies? Because they did well on DVD. Well, I think these movies got made because of like philanthropy.
So where's your new DVD stream?
We don't have one. That's it.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying.
It's called Netflix. All the studios, all the movies on Netflix are studio movies. Yes, it's changing. It's shifting. We're finding our way. It's not the 90s. It's not coming back. The boom times, yes, it's social media. We don't own that anymore. Got it. But
yeah, I don't think anyone's finding their way except for one company.
I'll say it's really something, Sean, when Richard makes you sound like an optimist.
I know. I'm like, why am I becoming, exactly, defending the 90s all of a sudden? This is a very odd position for me to be in. But anyway, a lively debate, one that will continue on. But Disney's finding a way, Richard. Disney was, I'll say, Bob was quiet. It was what it was. But the numbers were like, okay, there's a business here at least. So we'll see about Warner Brothers and Paramount. It's a different story in a few weeks. But anyway, Elaine, you're also looking at LA and serious business coming up. Well, this weekend or last weekend this week, right? In terms of our local economy.
Yeah, speaking of the doom and gloom beat, part of where this is all manifesting, where this production crisis is manifesting at home is after the wildfires in LA, the idea that there hasn't been a lot of production in LA. And for a lot of people, this is becoming the last straw, for an industry that was hit by the pandemic. And then this pullback and the peak TV bubble bursting, and then a writer strike and an actor strike. And that optimism, that we've talked about, that people came into 2025 with, was quickly dashed in LA by these awful wildfires. And so I've been talking to people about for whom it is the last straw, and has prompted them to say, okay, I don't think I can sustainably live and work in the city anymore, but also for the people who are looking to stay and rebuild. So that's coming up in this upcoming Monday's series business. And I most recently looked at the Stay in LA campaign, which I'm sure everybody has seen on social circulating. It's this petition where the organizers are looking for a twofold goal: to uncap the tax incentives for productions that shoot in LA County, and also ask studios to commit to 10% more production in the city and the county over the next 3 years. How feasible either of those things are is a big question mark, of course, but that's what they're aiming for. They've gotten, 17, 18,000 signatures. They have big supporters. You have A-listers like Keanu Reeves. You have major showrunners like Julie Plec who have signed this. But, I really talked to them about both the organizers and local showrunners about just like how feasible is this? And it really just comes down to the tax incentive. I mean, that's kind of the number one thing that everybody talks about. It's like practically a tired topic at this point, but it comes greatly down to the tax incentive of how do you make it, how do you make those resources available to keep production in state?
Yeah, Richard, I'm sure you would agree with look, I'm actually curious what your thoughts were on this, because we haven't really talked about it, but, signatures are great, but again, it's in the end, I don't know that it's not, I don't know. What should give me your thoughts here.
I can sign a thing saying I commit to keeping production in Los Angeles. I don't actually control any production. So me signing anything doesn't do anything. The people who write the checks for production, I'd like to see them, if they sign, and even showrunners aren't the ones that do that. It's
Right.
studios. So let me know when they sign. I mean, it's a tax incentive, and it's just like if you look at the fires that maybe made with it, it's like how many businesses have left California in the last 20 years.
Right, even outside of, the studio.
Outside, like I think this is really a piece of just like business abandoning California over 20 years, and a tax incentive will help that. But, you go from top to bottom, from just the climate of how they deal with things to property costs to everything else. And it's just until we address that somehow, a tax incentive helps, but that I don't think that alone does it. It's it goes along with that. So it's been happening for a long time, even before streaming was invented, and I don't see the state making any moves to even talk about this, let alone address it. So.
Well, Governor Newsom proposed back in October, more than doubling the current California tax incentive program to, I think it was from $330 million a year to $750 million a year.
The executives I talked about were like, that is a laughable amount.
Yeah, everybody I've talked to as well say it's not enough. It doesn't go far enough, especially when you think about what the incentives cover. I mean, it can't go toward above the line salaries, which it does in other states. And then hugely nonfiction series aren't eligible, which is why you have all of these unscripted shiny floor game shows that film in Ireland or in Australia. And it's like unscripted folks would love to be able to have more production in LA.
Show. Like, come on. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, you want to talk about what would occupy a lot of these empty sound stages.
I think we have a few.
A couple of shiny floor shows would do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I talked to one unscripted exec, and she was like, listen, the unscripted community is desperate to stay in LA, and it's just really disappointing that they aren't part of that conversation because, I mean, you want to talk peak TV, you want to talk how many series are out there. Unscripted and nonfiction outweigh the number of scripted series any day.
Oh, from a volume point of view. Yeah. Employing crews and employing, exactly. And, that's a lot of people, not just the contestants and hosts, it's more the behind the scenes people there. But I will note, Kathy Hochul here in New York this week put a proposal, kind of, no one was, I had not heard of this, but she's, a new $100 million fund for indie films for tax credits, and including some of those above the line costs. And, again, this New York is not approved. It's in the proposal in the budget, and extending the tax credit another 2 years. So again, this is what New York is doing. And again, it's not competing with Europe, but New York's business has been far less, hit by this stuff because there's a real effort.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, I think the tax incentive is the biggest thing, but I think it's like,
it starts momentum, yes. I mean, for that,
a lot of it can't be
it's not the only thing that's going to be
the only thing that changes the climate, then it's not going to go very far.
Yeah, it will come down to that grassroots bit of a lane of someone who has the clout to say, I want to shoot in LA, and someone, all right, well, this is what we're paying you for LA, and like, okay, well, this is okay. Like, comes
Well,
down.
I was asking producers, I was asking,
oh, really?
What would it take to, who has the influence outside of the studio to say, no, we're going to shoot here?
Right.
And of course, nobody wanted to name names necessarily, but basically, if you have a show with an A-lister who lives in LA and has enough clout, who says, you know what? I don't want to film anywhere but LA. I don't want to have to live someplace else for the next 4 months and leave my kids here.
So much so that when they say, okay, we totally want to accommodate you, so we're going to take $15 million out of your $20 million salary to pay for that. You're saying, oh yeah, all right, I'll work for a quarter of my normal cost to subsidize that.
Yeah, that's the question, Elaine, to a degree, I think.
That's one, basically, if the talent has to be A-list enough, and that's a very, very, very small pool of people, right? Because basically it's like either you have a huge A-list name who wants to stay in LA, or, you have a handful of first name basis showrunners who are able to do that. And, somebody was telling me that like Ryan Murphy is actually somebody who is a big advocate for keeping series in production in LA. And, these are all shows that keep, a piece hundreds of people employed.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Outside of that, your average workaday producer or showrunner does not have that influence.
And even Ryan Murphy, is not the one writing the checks. Like he
ultimately, but if Disney wants to keep Ryan Murphy happy and he wants to do it, then that could be clout's a very nebulous thing, Richard, in this town, certainly. So that's for sure.
Is he going to use? You have a negotiation when he sets up his deal and all that, and he says it like, is that a major negotiating point instead of, say, a higher salary?
Right.
You guys want to hear some stark numbers?
Yeah, I love numbers. Do I want to hear numbers? Elaine, please, come on.
I know you love a good number, Sean.
Yeah.
It was a rhetorical question.
You perked me up.
Okay, they're not happy numbers. So I was talking to IATSE International VP and the director of their motion picture and TV production, Mike Miller, and he told me that in 2022, they had about 123 million hours of employment that was contributed to the MPI pension and health plans. And in 2024, that number was about 88 million hours of employment. So that's a 28% drop. And he approximates that that means about 17,000 jobs that have just evaporated over the last couple of years. And obviously, that is a period of time that includes both of the strikes, but that's something that really didn't recover that much in 24.
Right, 24 was not the year, and we'll see what the number this year brings ahead. And yeah, that's pension money. That's real money, in the coffers of the unions, and that affects things down the line, Elaine. That's not just in a 1-year blip. So yeah, that was a stark number. But I'll raise your number with another number, Elaine, to close out here a little bit. So in that 10K forum in Comcast, speaking to go back to cable TV networks, I searched the document, and in 2019's 10K forum, cable networks, the phrase cable networks was mentioned 148 times. In the 2024 document, how many times do you think that phrase was mentioned?
So we're going for what, 128 to...
No, 148.
148.
In 2019, so 5 years ago, to how many now 5 years later?
52.
52. Richard, any guess?
0.
Richard, are you okay tonight? Your pessimism is a little more than usual. I'm going to say, I don't know about this. Down to 15. So 148.
I was closer
15.
than
You were closer than exactly. You were not. Yeah, give it a few more years, Richard.
I thought I had a deliberately low guess. Jesus.
Yeah, I was like, what? I did it twice. I'm like, did I do that right? I was like, wow.
Zero is in the ballpark.
Well, once SpinCo is out, you're probably right. Give it another year, Richard, a year or two there. So we shall see. But all right, another one, Richard. I'm gonna back in the movie business. I'm gonna ray of hope here for you. All right, this is go up on the optimism note here. So I think we need to do a wellness check at Sony, though. I'm a little concerned about the folks over there. But in the past 18 months, they've done R-rated comedies, rom-coms, adult romance thrillers, and they just announced they signed Eddie Murphy for something called an action comedy, Richard, based on an original script. Is something going on the water supply in Culver City? I don't even know what's up.
Yeah, I mean, they are taking chances where other people. I mean, I think that a part of it is that they consider themselves an arms deal or an arms race, so that they have the possibility to sell these films off to platforms that are still interested in comedy and thrillers and all these.
Which is Netflix, which is that's it. That is their home. But I was thinking back, Richard. So this is my own challenge. I was like, what was Eddie Murphy's last studio theatrical movie in theaters? A theatrical film that he starred in.
Last theatrical.
Has there been one in the last 10 years?
I had the same look on my face, Elaine. So yeah, exactly. It took me. I was like,
the Dr. Dolittle 2 or something.
It's not that, Elaine. Any guesses?
Norbert. I don't know.
Norbit. 1,000 Words, which was a 2012 comedy from Paramount. Oh. Guess who directed that movie? The person now running Paramount.
Yeah, I was going to Brian Robbins. Yeah,
Brian Robbins, who's now running Paramount. So
who also directed Norbert.
Who also directed Norbit? Yes, exactly. So, but yeah, 2012. So it's been 13 years since Eddie Murphy's been in a studio theatrical movie. So,
I mean, I've said it here before. Eddie Murphy is probably the most talented comic actor of the last 50 years, which makes him one of the most talented actors of the last 50 years, and we should be having theatrical movies with Eddie Murphy all the time.
Well, you're in luck. Sony's bringing it back, Richard. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But a glimmer of hope for you, Richard. The action comedy Eddie Murphy coming back into theaters, thanks to the folks at Sony.
Good for anybody who's making an Eddie Murphy project.
There you go. At the box office this weekend, of course, the Super Bowl weekend, usually nothing to crow about, and that doesn't look like it's going to change this year. Dogman is probably going to handily win. Elaine, did you contribute to the Dogman Fund or no?
Not yet. That's coming up this weekend.
Okay, all right. Universal, you have a couple of tickets coming from the Lowe family there.
I will help you in your time of need when everybody's watching the Super Bowl. Me and my family of 4 will go and watch Dogman. You're welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Hollywood. So we'll see how that goes. They have an action pick called Love Hurts from Universal and a horror pick from Sony called Heart Eyes as well. I'll track all that action on Sunday in the Wake Up, of course. Oh, and Elaine, we have a new addition at Series Business, which you mentioned before we go.
We sure do. We have Leslie Goldberg joining us under the Series Business banner. So she'll be writing I believe, weekly or semi-weekly newsletter as well, alongside Minori and I. She, of course, is very well loved in the industry, and we're looking forward to having her.
All right, coming to you at The Ankler there. You can sign up over at theankler.com to get all the newsletters, including Leslie's new addition to Series Business. And, of course, you can reach us here at the podcast anytime at podcasts@theankler.com and follow on the socials at The Ankler. Elaine and Richard, a pleasure as always. Elaine, safe travels back to the West Coast later today. And a big thanks to you all for listening. We'll see you next time.